transition from performing with music legends to crafting unforgettable tales. Today on Books with Bridgetti, we're joined by multi-talented Jonni Jordyn, an artist, performer, and author of The Old Child, Tome III. Today we'll discover her creative journey and the artistry behind her storytelling. So whether you're a fan of the arts or an aspiring novelist, this episode will inspire and captivate you.
Introducing Books with Bridgetti, a lineup of industry experts, award-winning authors and talented indie authors. Buckle up for an unparalleled journey with us. Meet exceptional authors celebrated globally for their captivating narratives. Our authors craft imaginative stories that stay etched in your mind long after the final page. It's not just stories, it's lingering experiences that stay etched in your mind. Our authors share the inspirations that create mesmerizing page-turning stories. Journeys that embody resilience, that turn setbacks into stepping stones, rejections that spark growth, and hurdles that become a catalyst for creativity. From dramas, mysteries, fantasies, children's stories to reality stories, join us as we delve into the inspiration behind the story, discover how authors breathe life into characters, and meticulously craft plots that keep you turning the page. But wait, there's more. We share stories from indie authors as well as Amazon and New York Times best-selling authors. Get ready for an interview that'll have you on the edge of your seat. Stay tuned. Join us only on Books with Bridgetti.
If you've just joined us, welcome to Books with Bridgetti. Our live stream is made possible by StreamYard, BeLive Media, also Creative Edge. In today's show, we're going to be talking to Jonni Jordyn, authors like you've never heard them before, only on Books with Bridgetti. Now, if you've not met my amazing guest yet, Jonni Jordyn is an accomplished author, an artist, a performer whose talents span music, acting, photography, and of course, writing. Starting her creative journey in Oakland, California in the USA, she's performed alongside legendary musicians in the 60s and 70s, and now, as the author of the Lost Art of Power series, she explores captivating tales of power, perseverance, and a world grappling with forces that we don't all fully understand. Let's meet Jonni. Jonni, welcome. I am delighted to have you on the show, Books with Bridgetti. I'm so glad you could join us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, I'm going to dive right in because the time goes by so quickly. Can you share how your diverse artistic background influences your method of storytelling?
Well, I'm lucky. I'm fortunate that with my autism, I did get gifts of creativity, which is why I was successful as a musician, and I even did some sketching and painting, but mostly music and writing. And also, I'm a developer. I'm a computer developer. So the logic section of that allowed me to take my stories and twist complicated subplots around the main plot and drive it all through the story, giving the readers little bits of knowledge here and there, and merging all together in the ending.
Oh my goodness, I didn't know that about you. And it's amazing how everything in life contributes to the way that we write, and that just adds another dynamic to your ability to be such a creative and author. Now, what inspired you to transition from the performing arts to writing novels? How did that come about?
I moved from California to Arizona, and I did try creating another music outlet, and it actually was going fairly well until one person quit to become an actor, and I was kind of left with, well, what do we do now? We were just a trio, and with just the two of us, the act kind of fell apart. So I thought, what do I do now? And I went back to my original love, which was writing, and that was something I started in high school and college, way back, and I went back to that, and it was a journey to go from somebody who previously written short stories to writing an entire novel.
Now, I know a lot of people talk about work-life balance, and sometimes you wonder, well, what is that exactly? So, how do you balance your creativity across a number of disciplines, like writing, acting, photography, programming? How do you balance all of those?
Well, first of all, in order for the programming to balance with everything else, I contracted for many years, which gave me the freedom and the ability to take time off to travel, and because now the band I was in, even though it was a very well known band, we pretty much only traveled between North and South California, uh, and so having that freedom allow the freedom of my work to be able to come and go as I please, allowed me to do the music. And when I left California, um, it was different. I was still contracting, and I was still traveling around. Now I'm traveling all around the country, and doing the music just wasn't sustainable. So I started writing again, and my work knows that I'm writing. They know I've written, several books, and they're all proud, and they like to see when I have new books coming out. Um, but I do have to, show up sometimes and get some work done. In fact, this past week was pretty difficult. We were moving some things from one part of the country to another, and it wasn't as easy as they thought it would be. But putting the time together to write, my mornings are mine. I, I jealously guard my mornings so I can write and edit. But I'm ready to retire too. I should add that in. So balancing work with writing is not going to be a problem for long.
I'm glad that you've had all those experiences that, and somehow you find a way of fitting it all into your life and making it work. And when you retire from development, as you said, life's going to become a little bit easier. Are there any lessons that you feel you learned from performing with some of the most iconic musicians that have shaped your approach to storytelling?
I had truly marvelous experiences. And I'm gonna drop a name. I played with members of Santana's band, and I played with his brother. Um, and one of the big lessons I learned is in trust. Is that the members of my band I trusted. The managers not so much. And so you have to know who's handling the money and how to trust. In the writing game, I'm finding that I found people I trust to help me with publishing. Not so publishing, but with the publicizing and getting my works out into people's hands. And so I think the main comment is knowing who to trust and who you're going to work with.
Very valid points, and talking about having a publicist on your side. The analogy I often use with people is, having a good publicist is like walking into a courtroom with a lawyer at your side versus not having one. You know, people just look at you differently when you have a publicist or you have a lawyer on your side. It's not the same as walking into a library or a bookstore and saying, oh, I'm the author of this is my book. Um, whereas walking in and saying, I'm the author, but talk to my publicist.
Yes.
It just levels up your game so much more. So, and you were talking about the right people. There are publicists and there are publicists. And if you have the right publicist, it makes a huge difference to the marketing efforts of your book.
When I started out, I tried finding people to review my books myself. I got maybe a dozen. When my publicist sets out to find reviewers for my book, we're over 100, and in it over a 3-day period. So it's I know how to write, but I don't know the right people to get it, moving along that track.
You couldn't have said it better. That just makes such a huge difference. Now, I want to ask you, going back into just writing, what were some of the challenges that you feel you faced when you transitioned from shorter works like poetry to writing full-length novels?
Fear. I mean, that was the challenge. I sat down and I started writing, and I hadn't developed the tools to actually flesh out and write a whole book. But I started writing, and all of a sudden I realized that the story was moving along. The story was developing, the characters were developing, and I was approaching 160,000 words. And that was just a huge reckoning. I thought, well, if I can do 160,000 words, I can do something a little more easier for people to digest. And so I actually put that book aside to write the next book.
Wow. Oh my goodness, that's absolutely amazing. Now, when you're writing, how do you manage to bring depth and relatability to your characters? Because that's what makes the story come alive.
Honestly, it was a surprise to me. I write out a basic outline. Then I'll take that outline, I'll turn it into a small paragraph, and then I start really fleshing out the book. And most of the depth of the characters is coming out in the revision stage, and I do a lot of revisions. I know what they're doing and I know what their motives are, but they start to take a life of their own. And even sometimes the characters will, as I'm evolving who they are and what they do and how they work, they will start to change and bend the storyline. And in fact, one of the characters from my second book is largely what introduced this third book.
Wow, that is amazing. I've often heard authors say that, who write novels, how much it surprises them when the characters start forming the story more than you, the author. They're often surprised by that. Now, you've written extensively. You're an accomplished author. What is the most rewarding feedback you've received so far from your readers of the Lost Art of Magic series?
Well, first of all, after the first book, I had several people come back and say they wanted more. They wanted to hear more about these characters. And I had to go back through the first book and pull out some stories that I just told shortly or alluded to, and start mapping those out to be a follow-up book. And I planned to have 3 books, and then the third book, which is going to be the Orb of Destiny. It was moving and developing in ways I didn't expect, to the point that I got to about 100,000 words and thought, I'm not even into the middle of the story yet. So I had to divide it into 2 pieces, which is how this book, the Old Child, came about. And the Old Child was based on a 12-year-old girl from the second book, who was kind of interesting, but she was just a cute little girl. And she became a little more cute in this book and became the central character.
And I like that. Can you? I'm going to stop there for a second. Can you tell me a little bit about that cover? Did you have any input in the design of that cover?
Yeah, I had quite a bit of input. I was insistent. Well, she had to be redhead because that was a major part of my character, and she had to be young looking. But when I first did my own original cover, I had a young girl with kind of an old woman superimposed on it, and for this one, we went with the young girl with kind of a slightly older nightgown on while she's holding this magical orb. And also, the magic that she developed was blue. I mean, she did things in blue colors that nobody ever saw. So I had to have blue running through the picture. So my illustrator, after several back and forth go-arounds, that's what we came up with.
You know, I'm always intrigued by this whole process because as an author, you've got something in your mind that you visualize your book cover to look like. And somehow you have to take those thoughts out of your head and convey it to the illustrator in a manner that they can get into your head and turn that into an image. You know, and it's always a thrill when I talk to authors and they say, my illustrator gave me exactly what I wanted. You know, they saw what I'd visualized in my mind's eye. So I always think this is an incredible thing when you end up with a cover that you like as an author, that you feel proud of, or that you feel nails what you had envisioned.
It can be challenging. Early on in my career, I tried getting an illustrator to do a cover for one of my books, and she came back with a bunch, and I said, those are lovely covers. They would be really, really good if this was a romance novel. But it's not. It's about magic and witches and people who want to kill them. And I just can't have a pretty girl bedroom eyes on the cover of the book. So this book, it wasn't the most challenging. We've had some covers where my illustrator kind of threw up her hands for a while and says, I don't know what to do. And then we would kind of go back from the beginning, start over, until we got something put together that was telling the story without giving away the story.
I can imagine, you know, talking about, so it's really is an iterative process, you know, back and forth until you are happy. And talking about back and forth and iterative processes, how do you approach the editing process? Because it's different for every author. And how do you know when your book is done, when it's ready for publishing?
That part's easy. I do revisions, and in the revisions, I may be adding to a certain character. I may be I might just be describing the room better or describing what they're wearing. But a lot of my books include a lot of personal interactions between the characters. And if I get all the way through a revision, and I usually do at least a half dozen or at least a dozen revisions, if I get all the way through and I haven't made any major changes, I know that I'm pretty much done. If I get through the book and I'm crying at the end because the ending brought tears, then I know I did it right. And this is what makes it easy, is when I get emotional over reading a book for the 24th time and I still get emotional, I know I did it right.
Wow. Listening to you reminded me of another author I spoke to recently, and she was saying that when she chose an illustrator, it wasn't just about the skills of the illustrator. She wanted to make sure that the person she gave the job to was a nice person. And I thought, wow, that's a new twist. I don't think I've ever heard anybody emphasize how important that was. So I get what you're saying about, feeling emotional and just at that point knowing that you've accomplished your mission. So what advice would you give to anyone wanting to become a writer who's completely green and still feel intimidated by the idea of writing a novel?
Well, my advice may not be really welcome and good advice to everybody, but I think that there's a skill and a talent in writing. And I don't know if you can learn that in school. And if you can't, and if writing is really not your inner talent, there are plenty of other things you can do with a book and about a book and around the book to help get it into people's hands. But to be a writer, I think you have to have the knack. I think it's something that has to come from inside.
You're not the first author to say that, and I think that there are some people who've learned the art by going to school and studying, but I think most of the really good authors are those who enjoy writing naturally and who've done it for many years. They don't have to think too hard. The stories the words just flow, and it's easy, and they get carried away by their storyline and their characters. Are there any real life experiences that inspired the themes or characters in The Old Child, or is it all fictional?
The Old Child is all fictional. However, the second book before it, I actually included my brother, my baby brother, who was a stage magician, and I included him as a cameo part in the book. That's about as real as I've ever gotten.
Wow. And how do you ensure that each of your books in the series stands alone while at the same time also contributing to the overarching story of the series?
Well, the first book definitely stands alone. The second book is expanding on a story from the first book, which kind of gives it its own beginning and end. I don't know if I fully succeeded in The Old Child because, as I said, it's the first half of a book that got too massive. It does have its own ending. And it leads us into the next part, but it is much more closely related to the next book as far as being continued a storyline. than any of the others were. But I have so many threads wound around in that book. Some of them are leading you into the fourth book, and some of them are completely encapsulated in the third book. And this is the third book, Tome III.
Yeah. Now, how do you stay creative? You know, what is your go-to for creativity?
That's a mystery. Ideas come, and I go through dry spells. Sometimes when I have to pick up a book that I've set aside for a while, as I'm doing now, I'll write maybe 3 or 4 pages, and then kind of get stuck again because I just kind of have to get the whole thing into the creative process. But it's hard for me to say where the stories come without exposing that I might be crazy. Just a little bit.
No, I totally get that. Looking at the publishing world, what excites you about the trends right now, or where it is, or where it's going?
Well, what my publicist has gotten done so far does have me excited. Getting the books in people's hands and reading their reviews and seeing everything that it affected for them, that is beyond what I had expected.
Well, that's wonderful, and I'm really, really happy for you. Again, it speaks to the fact that you have chosen the right publicist to represent you, and well done on making such an excellent choice. What are your thoughts on indie publishing, and do you have any advice for an aspiring indie author?
Well, I will say I have tried traditional publishing a couple times, and that is I have sent out the queries, and it's a very difficult process because the traditional agents are looking for something specific, and unless you decide I am going to write to what they want, you're stuck with writing your story, the ideas that you have, and that might not be what they're looking for. So there's independent publishing, and I think the main thing an indie author should do and should understand is work and work and work your words like you're kneading dough. It's don't just fling it out there. Oh, here's my first pass, and throw it to the world. Really polish it. And there's a lot of books out there that aren't getting that kind of attention. And it kind of reminds me of some bands over the years that were put together by corporations and really shouldn't have been out there. Maybe only a musician would think that.
I'm sure. Jonni, what can your readers expect from the final book in the Lost Art of Magic series?
Well, I haven't even started that one yet, but what I can tell you is the first book was introducing how magic had disappeared and how it came back. The second book was a struggle between the good and the bad. And the third book is trying to recuperate from what the evil people would have done, and so is the fourth book. Eventually, throughout the books, I have these mysterious characters called the librarians, and they come and go, and they don't seem to be bound by time. and they come and go, and they interfere in people's lives. And in the final book, I am going to finally reveal who they are and what they are. And I'm going to bring the entire story in a full circle back to the first book.
Wonderful, wonderful. Something to look out, something for you readers out there to look forward to. Now, talking about readers, something that a lot of authors struggle with is marketing. And we did talk a little bit about the importance of having a good publicist. But how do you, as an author, stay connected to your readers and engage with your audience?
I think that's yet to be determined. I just created a new publishing company about 3 or 4 months ago, which is when I engaged the publicist. And so we are reintroducing all of my books one at a time. And I'm just starting to see the reviews coming in. And so far they're spectacular. But I haven't quite built up that rapport with the readers.
It's always a work in progress, though, right? Because I don't think you ever get to the point where you say, I don't need to do this any longer. It's something that you have to do on an ongoing basis and continuously. Jonni, can you give us a sneak peek into some of your upcoming projects that you are excited about?
I have a rom-com that I released recently, and another rom-com should be coming out in January. And they're not serious pieces. They're just silly little stories that drift through somebody's life. I do think that coming up in 2026, I will be closing out another series I've written, which is about an intelligence, which we might call artificial, but it kind of asks the question about what is artificial. If an intelligence is based on logic chips and computer chips, is there a point where it actually becomes a true entity and not just a computer program? And so that's one project I have excited, and it's going to delve into religion as it pertains to this artificial intelligence.
Wow, that's something really, really interesting to look forward to. And I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us here on Books with Bridgetti. I really enjoyed the conversation with you. And to our amazing audience out there, I want to say thank you to all of you for joining us on Books with Bridgetti. And so if you enjoyed this conversation with Jonni Jordyn, don't forget to grab a copy of her book, The Old Child, Tome III, on Amazon. And we'd love for you to join us next time on Books with Bridgetti for some more authors sparking inspiration, one page at a time. Jonni, thank you again. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's a big Thank you for joining us on Books with Bridgetti. Join us next time for industry experts and award-winning authors.
I think this might be, I've been on over 24 different podcasts and radio shows in the last couple of months. And this has to be one of the most sophisticated, what the kids that I used to teach called bomb.com shows and presentations that I've ever been on. It's fantastic. Thank you for having me here.
Available wherever great books are sold near you.